Welcome to the first in a set of videos about Bali Unit for LotusScript, a unit testing framework and more, originally developed for VoltScript but also adapted for LotusScript. In this first video, I'm going to talk about the structure of the project, how to download it, and how to manage all the peripherals around the project, because it's slightly different to what you would expect from other OpenNTF projects. So if we look at the OpenNTF project itself, then we've got a summary here, and on the releases there's not much there. There's an attachment here. That's just because the OpenNTF website requires it. There is nothing in there. There's no point downloading that. Similarly, documentation, there's nothing there. There's just a link off to the other documentation. Feature requests, defects, discussions. Defects links off to OpenNTF, onto GitHub. Discussions, again, it's just placeholder information. Nothing is going to be picked up from here. Everything that you need to work with the project is accessed via this source control link here. Now that goes across to the OpenNTF project, and you'll notice that this is a fork of the HCL Tech Software GitHub repository. There's no point actually going to that if you're working with Domino. The code here includes some functionality that has been added as part of the evolution of LotusScript to VoltScript. So it won't compile if you copy it into a script library. The documentation is very similar, but as we'll see, there are some changes that have been made for OpenNTF. So going across the OpenNTF repository, that is the place to go. Now this is in many ways a standard GitHub repository, although GitHub probably covers some of functionality that Domino developers may not be familiar with. If we come across to the issues, then when you create an issue, it's using GitHub templates that allow you to create a bug report, a feature request, and it kind of walks you through information that's required, which will help us manage that bug report or feature request more fully. Pull requests, it's possible to create a fork from the project and therefore submit a pull request back in, and we'll welcome those. Pull requests are the standard way to contribute changes back. We've also got the discussions area, and this is an area in a GitHub repository that's fairly new. We've got discussions in there for the two release candidates, and I'll talk about the difference between those shortly. But discussions allow a kind of threaded set of posts to discuss particular topics. Now, just coming on to a couple of other peripheral aspects for the GitHub repository. The documentation is accessed via this link here, and that opens up this separate tab with all of the documentation around the project. It's using mkdocs, and that's a standard that we're starting to adopt in HCL for a lot of the GitHub documentation. It's something that you may have come across with Domino REST APIs. It's also used by DX as well. To actually get the code itself, we've got the source code and the source files here, and a lot of the structure of this may be unfamiliar, it's certainly not standard for NSF-related content. It's more the kind of thing that you would expect to see from a Java or a JavaScript repository. We've got source, and that's where the latest version of the code will be, and it's the Bali test runner.bss. But we've also got a test area, we've got the docs, which is what's generating here, and a Docker file, which is used to kind of preview those documentation. The other place to get to the release assets for a particular release is going to the releases area. So if we go across the releases, we'll see there's two releases in there. There's the initial release, 1.0 release candidate 1, and also release candidate 2. Now, as I was looking to put together videos, I identified a bug in some of the refactoring that I'd done of the VoltScript code for arrays when it was being converted to LotusScript. So release candidate 2, if you're doing any validation of arrays, then this is definitely one that you want to update to. The download themselves, you've got a zip of the whole repository. There's a snapshot when that release was created. But the key file that you want is the Bali test runner.bss. Now, .bss is just the suffix that we use for VoltScript files. It's basically the same as an LSS. So at this point, this file is code that can be pasted into a script library in Domino Designer, and it will compile successfully as LotusScript. Now, why are we putting those releases on GitHub? Well, there's a number of reasons, but one of the key ones here is that because we're using GitHub issues and because we're using GitHub commits related to those issues, it automatically generates the what's changed and the full change log for that release. So this is functionality that is not available automatically through any other route. So it makes sense for us to leverage GitHub for that. There are other reasons, and if you come along to the session on VoltScript at Engage, if you're there, then you'll see some more information about that. But this is where you would get that file, and that will then download the BSS. If at any point you want to just get the latest, then you can come across to the file, switch to raw, and then just copy and paste that into a script library. But the recommended approach would be to go to a particular release via the releases area. So that's how to actually navigate the GitHub repository and work with the GitHub repository. In the next video, I'll go into some of the functionality within the Bali test runner and getting it set up in Domino Designer.